Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I am joined by my co-host Bryan Smith and Greg Zumach. Boys, the boys are back in town. It's been a hot minute. Alexa, play "Boys Are Back in Town" by Thin Lizzy. Is that who sings that? I don't know.
Oh man, you're asking the wrong two. I think
we're gonna roll with that one.
Isn't that Don Henley? Or no, maybe I'm. Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know.
I took that somewhere that we couldn't finish it off. That's what happens when you don't podcast for about a month.
Right.
Yeah, no, we're back. It's been. I looked it up. I was talking with Bryan right before you hopped on Zumach that I think that this is the longest that I've gone without podcasting, without like dropping a Cubs prospect podcast since I started doing this back in 2019. So it's been a hot minute. But it was I needed it. I know that we had some scheduling conflicts on our end, but honestly, it was great. It was great to kind of take a step away before we dug into this annual award show. But like Zumach, I'll kick it to you first here. I'm excited. I'm excited for for this award show that we do every year.
You know, I am too, because it's a good way to like recenter like what we kind of look at, right? Because for the past few years, there have not been a ton of things at the major league level to be excited about into October. Mm-hmm. And now we got it this year, which is the ultimate reason that we do this. Mm-hmm. But that being said, it's also, there were some good things that happened on the farm system, and there were some intriguing draft picks that, and some of them even made impact. Like the system is more than just the 26 guys who were on the playoff roster. Mm-hmm. And you know, this team is going to need a lot of contributions going forward. So yeah, it's great to get back. And, you know, we sent out the categories and I had to kind of rethink about a few different ones that jived, even though there were thoughts in June. And yeah, it's good to get back into it.
And Bryan, I feel like as we're doing this, like when we go throughout the season, as we're dropping episodes weekly throughout the season, so much of it is like what our conversations are based on like who was hot this past week or who was hot over the past couple weeks, or talking about the trade deadline, or talking about things that are happening as the season wears on. And this gives us a chance to kind of like zoom back out and like look at the season as a whole and hand out 20 awards based on what we saw.
Yeah, I know we talked a ton this year about how the context of talking about an organization that's competing for the playoffs sort of changes the way that we talk about prospects, especially with how many guys the Cubs had at AAA that may or may not be ready to contribute or whatever. And now we get to kind of throw that out of the window. You know, we're not going to talk about the major league team very much today. We're just going to sit back and get our nerd on and go, you know, Myrtle Beach Pelicans bullpen if we have to.
So we got, like I mentioned, we got 20 awards to hand out. I think it's the same 20 as last year. We did get some suggestions and recommendations on, I think on the Discord, some people gave some recommendations, and there were some that were pretty similar to what we were already handing out. So I think we're kind of roping those into what we have here today. And this episode will probably go a little bit longer, and if history is evidence, a little bit longer than our typical hour. But we're going to try to churn through some of these, given the fact that we have 20 awards to hand out today. And I think there's no reason to wait until the end. Let's go ahead and start off at the top with what would essentially be the top award in the system. Let's talk hitter of the year. And so we've talked on past episodes how it seemed to be a 2.5 horse race, right, going into the end of the season. I'll start off with you, Bryan. What's your pick? Who is your pick for Cubs minor league hitter of the year?
So like I just mentioned, not talking about the major leagues here. So I am not giving any credit to anything a guy does when he gets to Chicago. There were two guys that impressed when they got to Chicago and they left Iowa, but you know what leaving Iowa means? It means you're not doing anything for the Cubs farm system anymore. And there was one guy who did stuff for the system all year, and that was Johnny Long. Johnny Long, not a guarantee to make the Iowa roster out of spring training, makes it, secures an everyday spot there, is pretty much their most consistent hitter all year. I mean, just does not really have a super bad stretch all season. I think leads the system in hits. Just a really, really great season that sort of solidified his place, I think, in the Cubs' plans one way or the other. And for me, he was just the guy that contributed to a minor league team the most this year.
Zumach, are you on the same page as Bryan here?
So that's just it. I thought it was going to be trendy with Johnny Long. And if we're thinking who is the hitter of the year, the guy just hit. Exactly what Bryan said, like from start to finish. There was barely any kind of cold streak for him. He was always filling up the box scores. And to the point that teams were asking about him in July for like very good reason, right? To me, if we are only looking at the minor league side, it's Johnny Long. I think if we factored in some aspect of contributions from the major league level, I would think a little bit differently. And I'd probably toss out the guy who was hitting cleanup down the stretch for a very contending club in Moises Ballesteros.
Yes.
But if we are only talking about the minor league level, what Johnny Long did this year is impressive. And it is just another season in a good stretch in the Cubs organization. Dude just hits. At some point, he just hits.
I'll go the opposite way here. I'm going to pick Owen Casey as my Cubs minor league hitter of the year. Part of that is so the college game day effect, right? Where if we put the graphic up, it's not a clean sweep of Johnny Long and leaving Owen Casey out. But no, I had Owen Casey circled on my list here before you guys mentioned your picks of Johnny Long. I think that Owen Casey, the three guys, right? Moises Ballesteros, Owen Casey, and Johnny Long are kind of the three contenders here. And you're right, Zumach. I think that Moises Ballesteros has an absolute case given the fact that he was batting cleanup towards the end of the season for the Chicago Cubs. Had an incredible season. I think all three dudes really propped up their prospect stock over the course of the season in varying degrees, right? I think that as we entered the season, we had question marks about was what Johnny Long did in the back half of last season legit, and he confirmed yes, it absolutely is legit. We had questions about is that like true game power going to show itself for Owen Casey, and it did this year. And I think because of that, we saw him soar up some prospect lists nationally. And then Moises Ballesteros really proved himself that it doesn't matter what his defense looks like behind the plate because he's an elite hitter. And so you can make the case from the prospect status of any of these guys. Statistically, the sample size is smaller for Owen Casey than Johnny Long because he didn't spend the entire season in Iowa like Johnny did. But statistically, he was just absolutely phenomenal, was Owen Casey, showing off the power. 930-ish OPS this season in AAA Iowa. He was outrageously good. And so I'm going to go with Owen Casey while you guys go for Johnny Long, which is, I think if you can make an argument for either one of those dudes for sure.
I mean, you just love the fact that the three guys who would be the real finalists for this award are all guys that are right on the precipice of the majors, and the options that gives the Cubs moving forward is huge.
And real quick shout out, because I mean, you mentioned the power, or we're kind of getting into it with more of the OPS. Dude, Owen Casey developed consistently throughout the season to the point that he was cutting down on, on whiffs to such a degree that it really changed his profile. I mean, dude was developing on the fly, facing right-handed changeups might be something he's going to work on this fall. And obviously, hopefully he's all back from the concussion issues, but yeah, and all three guys really impressed this year.
All right, we're going to move on to starting pitcher of the year, which feels awfully sweepy here. Not sweep in terms of the type of pitch that he throws, but in terms of who our picks are. Zumach, I'll let you lead off with starting pitcher of the year.
You probably haven't heard of him, but Jackson Wiggins. The moves in July certainly cemented it, but Jackson Wiggins, what he did was awfully impressive this year. He looked more and more like a starter. There were definitely some load management or some possible issues he was working through. It doesn't seem serious. He came back at the end of the season and was throwing. But the control took a big step forward. I wouldn't say the command's there yet, but, even somebody with Wiggins stuff that throws with like 40 command could be an upper tier kind of pitcher. It was just impressive. The Cubs definitely need to do something this winter to address or into next summer to get more pitching in the system for sure. But can't knock what Wiggins did.
Yeah, I'll jump in right here. Wiggins is my pick as well. And I think that it's really interesting that this doesn't always work out where a guy ends up putting himself on the map in the way that Jackson Wiggins did and posts the stats and has the whole package to be starting pitcher of the year, right? Like we can talk about giving out this award for the guy who's really like showcasing better stuff and he's more of a prospect now. We can also talk about the other side of things where like a dude just posts. He posts great numbers throughout the season, but like maybe the prospect stock isn't a top 100 guy. Jackson Wiggins really like did it all this year. And I think that this is one of the easier selections that we've made in the few years of handing out awards.
Yeah, it might be interesting if there was a guy who just had a ton of a ton of innings and pitched really well and was kind of, you could have that quantity versus quality argument, but like all those cases are pretty nebulous. And when you talk about Wiggins, you talk about a guy who got so much better year over year. And I've said this on the pod a couple times, but just the guy, the misses that he had in 2024 versus the misses that he had in 2025, it's really hard to explain to people that didn't watch this year how big of a difference it was. I mean, he took such a huge step forward, and he got sent to South Bend out of spring training, which was a huge surprise, I think, to most people that were around Arizona because of how good he looked. And it could have been something that sort of aided him, and he just very quickly went out and proved that he belonged to be in Double-A, and then when he was in Double-A, proved that he was too good for that level too. And it gives you a lot of hope, I think, about his future moving forward. The fact that he can progress year over year and make those improvements and make command improvements, which not everyone's able to do. And B, the fact that, he just has that ability to just assert himself as better than the person in the batter's box, and he does it pretty constantly.
Real quick from both of you guys, you can't be held accountable for your response, but what month next year do we see Jackson Wiggins up in Chicago? Bryan, I'll start with you.
May.
Z?
Assuming he stays in the org. I don't know. When do the Cubs go into? I don't know. I'm just messing with people that are listening. Purely on talent, staying in the organization. I would say June.
Yeah, I mentioned somebody recently, like it's giving off like the same timeline as Cade Horton for me, like this year, like that timeline I could see with Jackson Wiggins next year. The parallels
a little bit less polished though.
Well, yeah, no, I mean in terms of like when we see him in Chicago, not necessarily. I think that there's less polish from Wiggins entirely, but I mean, but it is going to be important. I think that it's probably worth a dig this offseason into like comparing. I think we might have talked about it, like Cade Horton and Jackson Wiggins, like line for line, season for season, like because there's going to be so many parallels between the two guys. Like we're going to be talking about Jackson Wiggins and Cade Horton all the time, and so like I think we need to identify those differences between those two dudes. Obviously not on this episode here, but it's going to be worth our time for sure. All right, let's dig into reliever of the year. I'll go ahead and lead off with this one here. For me, I've got this is kind of a 3-horse race between 3 dudes in the organization. I am going to give the award to Riley Martin, but I think that so I guess this is something I'm digging into the stats a little bit here, right? So my runner-up for this award is Jackson Kirkpatrick. And I think that part of it is because the numbers he posted were just downright silly. He posted, I think it was 44 innings for Kirkpatrick, and he had a ERA right around 1. He had a whip right around 1. He had a strikeout rate of right around 35%, just outrageously good all season long. And OPS against around 450 or so for Jackson Kirkpatrick, but the workload wasn't there nearly as much as what Riley Martin's was. 44 for Kirkpatrick. Riley Martin did throw 63 and 2/3 innings for Riley Martin. On the season, a 2.69 ERA, 31% strikeout rates, 584 OPS against. But the thing that stands out to me the most with Riley Martin is that he had one outing this season where he was working as a starting pitcher, and he got blown up in that one outing that he worked as a starting pitcher. If you remove that one start that he had, so just Riley Martin, the reliever, the ERA goes from 269 to 234, so 0.3 off his ERA just from one start where he went like 2 innings. And with that, his OPS against goes from 584 down to 548, which is kind of crazy given one start. And so Those are like kind of the main two in my eyes. The third guy is probably Luis Martinez Gomez. So I don't want to steal all the names because I'm sure that you guys might hit on some of these guys. But Riley Martin was terrific all season long, getting better as the season wore on as far as stuff goes, in my opinion. And his command and control was reined in a little bit as the season wore on. Pitching all year in Iowa, I thought Riley Martin was terrific all year. Brian, who you got?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about Riley later in the pod for sure. He's going to come up again for me. So I'm going to go with Jackson Kirkpatrick here. I mean, 1.02 ERA. So he pitches 19 less innings, but man, I mean, he just gave up nothing this year. He was amazing. If people are not familiar with Jackson, he's a big dude. He was I believe he was an undrafted free agent, right?
Signing out of Tread, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. And just a big dude. And actually, it's kind of funny. He comes from Tread because he reminds me a little bit of Jameson Tyone in terms of build and stuff. And, JMO's year was sort of built on going to Tread in the offseason. But Kirkpatrick just was dominant from the beginning. Went to Myrtle Beach, was obviously too good for that level, but then was pretty much the same in South Bend. Walked a few too many players, but it's kind of that like, when a late inning reliever walks somebody, but then, ultimately it's because it's an open base and they just strike the next guy out anyway. It never came back and hurt him. And he was phenomenal, and I think is easily in the mix for the best relief prospect in the system. And given his year, I got to give it to him.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually Riley for me. I love what Kirkpatrick did. I think that was just a dynamite signing. That's the kind of thing that I think the Cubs need to nail more and more and more. And hopefully they've got the connections to do that. I think that certainly had some promising ones. So Kirkpatrick in most years would deserve it. Riley's going to be a name we're going to bring up a couple times, but he was a guy that had they not maybe taken a flyer on Tom Cosgrove or Genesis Cabrera, I think Riley Martin's making his debut this season, to the point that I'm still even a little shocked it didn't quite happen. But I think what he continued to show is that, yeah, he absolutely deserves to be a major league reliever. And he's put in the work, he's put in the effort, and he's gotten the results. So he's going to be the answer for a couple of my things this kind of episode, but I just got to give it to Riley Martin.
I think it's pretty cool that the two guys that we just named were a draft pick out of a D2 school that signed for $5,000 and an undrafted free agent that went and played indie ball and then got signed out of Tread. Like that's cool that those two, and that's what, like you mentioned, Z, like that's what you want to see from guys that are up for reliever of the year in the system. Like they got to pull some of these dudes that they developed the heck out of and have made into some pretty damn good pitchers. So I think that's fun. All right. Next
I really just want to quickly note. So Brian was also right. So he did work out with Tread, but he is an undrafted free agent. So
both are true.
Nice. Yeah.
All right. Next up on the docket is breakout player of the year. And I think this is a little bit tricky, right? Because like this is, I think this might look different depending on if you're an avid listener of the show and get into the weeds on prospects versus if you're like, just talking about a guy that popped up on the radar. Like, I think that like, I don't know how, I don't want to speak out of turn for you guys, but Jackson Wiggins has an absolute case to be the breakout player of the year because he's a guy who we hoped would make that jump. And then he is now a top, 75 prospect in all of baseball. And so like that, I think that's a legitimate case there. I'm going to lead off here. I'm going to pick Angel Cepeda as my breakout player of the year. Oh, I got a reaction out of both of you guys, which is fun. Cepeda is I think that in the kind of the way I just mentioned for Jackson Wiggins, like we were kind of hoping that Cepeda would be that guy. Like there's a lot of hype surrounding Angel Cepeda, but like we weren't ranking him as like a top 15 prospect in the organization. Going into this past season, I had him ranked as the 26th best prospect in the organization, and that was only based off of like word of mouth, right? Like we had only seen him down at the Arizona Complex League, so we didn't know what we were getting from Angel Cepeda. He obviously got off to a slow start, but in the first half of the season, but also kind of like didn't look overmatched, I guess, in that first part of the season, and then just took off the second half. I have him as like clear as day a top 15 prospect in the organization. He's sniffing around the top 10-ish for me, which is super, super fun. And so, yeah, Angel Cepeda is that guy that broke out the most in my eyes. So, based on your, I'll start with Zumach. What you got?
Yeah, so Cepeda was going to be my guy, and
Okay.
just so it's not a clean sweep, I will come up with a different name here. But yeah, what Cepeda did this year is awesome. So I'll toss him into another answer here coming
Okay.
up because I was razor thin.
Nice.
I am going to go with a name that hopefully this qualifies, but I think we're not being too stringent here. I am going to go with Kane Kepley because what Kane Kepley looked like in college, was very similar to this, but there were definitely some questions about transferability, and there were clearly not questions to the Cubs organization. What Kepley has done, without getting too specific here, is looked really good on certain models. And too, like he's added a tremendous amount of value to this organization. And I'm not saying they're going to look to trade him or anything, but it's definitely something where it's like, hey, teams are acknowledging now that this guy went from anytime you can take a second round pick, not over slot, he's actually under slot, to get all of a sudden like this much significant value in projection is a huge breakout. Will it continue? Probably not at this threshold, right? Like unless he's actually Barry Bonds, which would be awesome. But if he can continue to be very successful as he moves up the ladder, this is a slam dunk pick. And frankly, I wanted to pick him for one of these because I've been the low guy on Kane Kepley, or at least from the draft side. And I'm not saying that I've completely changed my tune. I still have some reservations, but he certainly made good on everything you could possibly want for and more.
Bryan, what you got?
Yeah, Cepeda also was going to be my pick. I think he will be my pick. Last 45 games in Myrtle Beach, Cepeda hit 320. Batting averages and everything, but that does tell a story, especially for a teenager at a level that nobody was hitting anything this year. So he not only sort of got to camp and was already sort of mid breakout, but he then got way, way better as the year went along. Really, really impressive player. That's one of those examples of like we talk about breakout players possibly in the off season so much that like they start losing their ability to break out because we've overhyped them, and he's kind of one of those guys. So if I just toss out a couple extra names that I think fit this category that we didn't talk about last offseason very much, Justin Florentino's a big one. I mean, that's a guy that I saw in spring training this year pitch, and I did not know who he was.
Yeah.
I searched, and he was pretty cool looking to watch from behind home plate. Really low slot delivery, kind of knew where the ball was going. Slider really sweeps, and so he's really fun. And so I just noted him, but didn't really think much. And then he gets to Myrtle Beach, and he just was phenomenal. Switched on the whole year, and really good. The other name I want to throw out is Ariel Armas, who skips Myrtle Beach, kind of one of those draft picks where you're like, why did Dan K do this? Like, I don't really see it in the top 10 rounds. Didn't hit a ton in college, and Armas was awesome in South Bend this year. I mean, had like the 1 month that was amazing at the plate, but also threw out a ton of runners from behind the dish, and just sort of showed he belonged all year. And I think is like legitimately a top 50 prospect in the system now, which is something I never ever thought would happen when he was drafted.
Hand up. Justin Florentino, not even remotely on my radar when he got called up to Myrtle Beach. He got the promotion, the notification came through that he got promoted up there this season, and I said who? Like I didn't know who it was. And we are giant nerds on the show and know way too many dudes, and I did not know who Justin Florentino was. So shout out to him. A couple more names that I have for honorable mentions. Yenry Rojas was really impressive this season.
Yeah.
Another guy that really kind of jumped out of nowhere. And then I want to give a shout out to Carter Trice as well, who kind of once he got that promotion up, started to tail off towards the end of the season. But the first half of the season for Carter Trice really put him on the map a little bit more than he was previously. So a couple shout outs to those guys. All right. Next up is the comeback player of the year. And I think this if we're predicting clean sweeps, this might be another one. This one's different though. Like I mentioned this with Jackson Wiggins because he kind of ran away with the award and there was no one else kind of in the vicinity of winning this award. But for comeback player of the year, there's a lot of different options. So when we kind of rattle off some names at the very end here, there's lots of names we can throw out. Bryan, I'll start off with you for your pick for comeback player of the year.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a guy that actually, since we last recorded, we found out is gonna be back in the organization next year, and that's Tyler Schlafer. Tyler was sort of lost in the wilderness there for a couple of years just from an injury, and had Tommy John, and just seemed like he was gonna fall off the radar. You know, a guy that was really solid when we'd seen him in the minors before, but just felt like there wasn't quite enough there to succeed in the upper levels, and he just hadn't made it to the upper levels yet, and time was ticking away on him. And then he gets back this year from the injuries, and he's like 96. He's throwing a knuckle curveball that's better than any breaking ball he threw before by far. And his changeup's always been pretty solid, and so he had a professional mix, and he just kind of got better and better as the year went. A little bit of a slow start in South Bend, and then really turned it on, and then got to Knoxville and dominated there in Double-A. Really good season, and I think, like, you know, if he's able to be healthy next year and pitch like he did this year, there is a legitimate chance that he would like find his way to a spot start in Wrigley. Like, that is on the table now.
Zumach, you agree?
Yeah, it was Schlafer pretty much hands down for me. I think that you could make a case for a couple other people, but you know, I think what he showed, not even the stats, kind of like what Bryan was saying, like the stuff was just materially different across the board. I mean, if you showed me this outing a couple years ago, I don't know that I would have believed it. Absolutely no insult to Tyler, but just another proof that like pitching development in particular is not linear. Just took a massive jumps. Really did put himself on the radar. I'm still wondering if a team doesn't try or consider popping him in the Rule 5. You know, he's back on a minor league successor deal, which is fantastic news. And really the only path for the Cubs. There's no way they would 40-man him. I think you just kind of rolled the dice there. But, you know, he showed at least enough at the upper levels that it made me question it. So it'll be something interesting to watch. But with the way teams operationalize Rule 5, likely, you know, he'll be back in the system next year. And like you said, he could absolutely make his debut next year.
Yeah, clean sweep for Tyler Schlafer for comeback player of the year for me. He's I mean, if there was a guy that fit the definition of comeback player of the year, he would be the guy, both from injury and from not really having statistical success and stuff across the board. Like, he just improved and he came back in a huge way this season. And the fact that he was really showing out this season, it wasn't like he just came back and was like good. Like, he came back and was terrific this season. So he was a guy that got plenty of love on this show throughout the season. Plenty of
Cubs
love.
fans saw a ton of Chad Patrick from the Brewers in the playoffs this year, and the difference between Tyler Schlafer and Chad Patrick stuff wise is not that significant. Those are two players with very similar builds. Patrick had a huge step forward this year. You know, Tyler Schlafer one more step forward. That's not an impossible future for him.
I like that. I like that a lot. Some other names that came to mind for me for this award, since I kind of hinted at it, BJ Murray Jr. had a comeback season this year, obviously down in a level that he probably doesn't need to be. He needs to be up in AAA, but statistically a much better season in a league that was impossible to hit in. Jefferson Rojas came back after a rough injury-riddled season where he still played quite a bit in 2024. Jefferson Rojas was terrific, especially during his time in South Bend this season. And then Ethan Flanagan, talk about a guy who was dealing with injuries for quite some time. For him to come back and shove the way he did, be kind of in that mix, Ethan Flanagan and Justin Florentino for the Cy Young Award in Myrtle Beach. All those guys came back in huge ways this season.
And how about Ben Leeper just making it back to a professional pitching mound? You know, shout out to Ben here. Just showed a ton of grit getting back out there and actually pitched pretty good when he got to Knoxville.
Yeah, that's a good call. All right, ready for the next one here, boys? We're gonna go most fun to watch this season. Now, so we kind of covered the awards that typical, right? The hitter of the year, the comeback player. This is where it gets a little bit more fun here. So the guy that we thought was the most fun to watch this season, I'll lead off, and I'm picking Jackson Wiggins. Maybe that's simple, but Kane Kepler was kind of the other guy I was thinking about here. But
Nice.
Jackson Wiggins was appointment television every time he took the mound, and part of that was because of the weird middle of the season thing where he wasn't throwing. It's like, oh, I'm excited to see him throw, but why is he not on the mound? Like, part of it was that, obviously, but like just the good old country hardball that he throws, and like it's a fastball we have not seen in this organization, and we talked about it for years, and so that uniqueness to that fastball is worth watching every single time he takes the mound. And so Jackson Wiggins is my pick for most fun to watch. Brian, what you got?
I'm going to go with Alexi Lumpoy in Myrtle Beach. Alexi had a really up and down season, like as up and down a season as you could possibly have. But if you just watch him play, he's a phenomenal defender. You know, he when we talk about best defense later in the episode, he is somebody that I have written down for that. I don't think he'll be my pick, but really goes and gets it in the field. You know, can easily steal a base, and then just was one of those guys that was prone to having monster games this year. You know, hit for the cycle and all that, and just one of my favorite players. He's super twitchy. He's very different than most Cubs prospects. He's got that little extra bit tick of athleticism that a lot of guys don't have, and even when he's failing, he's fun to watch.
Yeah, the guy I want to give a shout out who hasn't been talked about yet, but just is fun for me is Ty Southesine. The ball is not going 400 feet yet, right? Like, but I think that there is some grit in there and some power in there eventually. But the dude can just hit, and he plays with his hair on fire. I mean, it's kind of like Kane Kepley, but we tossed him out earlier, and I just kind of wanted to give a similar vibe to a guy that the Cubs scouts absolutely loved him. And even talking to a couple of like the officials, you know, post draft and when Southesine really wasn't having a lot of success at the time, they're just like, the dude's going to hit. He's hit everywhere. You just don't mess with him. Let him hit. He'll figure it out. I love it. Guy gets on base. We'll worry about slug later. It cracked me up every time.
I mean, the Kane Kepley, Ty Southesine, like it's the PCA Nico Horner, like kind of creating chaos on the base pass, like looking damn good in the field. Like it's they're cut from the same cloth for sure. Just baseball rats. I love it.
I do want to note that we're probably overthinking it since Moises Ballesteros still qualifies for this category. Yeah. He is, you know, one of professional baseball's most fun players to watch, and he hit his fucking first major league home run to Anthony Rizzo in the bleachers. So just one of the most absurd things in baseball history that happened from one of the most fun dudes. So
I was gonna bring that up on a later one, but yeah.
I was gonna say that was probably the most fun single event of the entire year by a long shot. Like by a long shot.
Got my Anthony Rizzo like bobblehead ready to go for that exact comment. Like,
we do nothing but step on each other's toes in this episode.
Yeah. Well, I think that part of it is because like guys can fit into multiple categories here, so we like to mention them. All right, so that kind of leads the most fun to watch. That kind of leads into the next award that we're handing out, which is the most excited to watch next year. And so I think that in past years, this award is kind of it's leaned towards going towards our first round pick from this season, right? It's been that guy typically, and so I think that's a perfectly good pick here, going Ethan Conrad. I'll change it up a little bit and go with a guy who's been mentioned already for you here, Brian. Alexi Lumpoy is my pick for most excited to watch next year. Like I'm just part of it is because he's fun to watch. But part of it is like what version of Alexi Lumpoy are we getting next season? Like, is he going to be up in South Bend? Is he going back to Myrtle Beach? Like, what's the progression of Alexi Lumpoy over the course of next season? Is he going to develop into a guy that is a true like speed and power type of guy? Is he going to lean more into the contact and like run the bases? Like I don't know what type of player Alexi Lumpoy is moving forward, and I'm excited to see that play out in 2026. So that's why Lumpoy is my pick here. Zumach, I'll kick it to you next.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to, I actually wanted to stay away from Ethan Conrad, just in the nature of, tossing out something. I'm going to talk about the guy that really the Cubs hinged so much of their draft on yes, Ethan Conrad. Obviously, your first rounder is always going to carry you. But the second part of that, the vast majority of their like, this guy needs to hit is Josiah Hartshorn. And by all accounts from people inside and outside the organization, they're like, that dude hits. Like, I don't know. Like, he has such weird dynamics in the sense that he's technically ambidextrous and he could play the outfield, or maybe he could play first, and he theoretically could pitch, but he's probably not going to do that. But everybody's like, yeah, but that dude just mashes. And he might mash from both sides of the plate. And good friend Brad, I think, on the Discord and social media, tossed out the Lance Berkman comp. That, yes, that's insanely aspirational, and obviously he wasn't assuming that. But now that I've watched that and watched some of his amateur stuff, I like can't get it out of my head. Josiah Hartshorn could just totally rake next year, and I just am so excited. I'm going to be glued. Not assuming he's going to, but I'm just going to be glued effectively to the phone watching every Josiah Hartshorn plate appearance.
Yeah, I was actually gonna say Josiah as well, but I'm gonna
Were, Brian. Of course you were, but
I'm gonna switch over to Jefferson Rojas, because a lot of Rojas's minor league career has been like, feels like his ranking is like a hedge between, if he really breaks out, that's a top 10, top 20 overall prospect. But there's always been that sort of little bit missing, and then we had this couple months stretch this year where it seemed like, oh my gosh, the breakout's happening, it's here, like he's sort of putting it all together. And then he got to AA, and he found himself in quicksand really fast. You get those first 20 at bats that suck, and then it's just really hard to dig yourself out. And then his year ended early as well. If he gets to AA next year and just does what he has done each year, which is just show up the next year better, and does in Knoxville in the first half next year what he did in South Bend in the first half this year, then we're talking about like a real difference making player for the organization. So I'm really excited to see if he does take that step.
You know why another reason why Jefferson Rojas is a good pick for most excited to watch next season. It's because like he has been, for the entirety of the time that we've ranked Jefferson Rojas on our prospect rankings, he's been like, we talked about the guys up at the upper levels, right? It's the Owen Casey's and James Triantos and Kevin Alcantara. Like we talked about those guys that have been up above him in terms of like where they're at in the organization. And we've been like, oh yeah, but like don't forget, like Jefferson Rojas is down there too. And like now, starting in 2026, Jefferson Rojas is in the upper minors as well. Like while the other guys are figuring out how they fit in the majors and are they added the 40-man roster and using option seasons in AAA, like this is where Jefferson Rojas now catches these other guys in AAA if he performs well in AA to start off the year. And so this is kind of the first wave meeting the second wave, which is kind of just Jefferson Rojas in terms of like true impact players outside of Jackson Wiggins. I'm talking position player wise, but that's another reason why he kind of fits here. I like that.
Yeah, when you're 2 years away from being 2 years away, it's one thing, but now we're like, now we're getting there.
Yeah. I'm shocked, Brian, that you didn't pick Edgardo De Leon. Shocked.
Oh, that would have been a good pick. Yeah.
Well, maybe next time.
No, that's a good one. I have regrets.
All right, this season, who takes the award for biggest surprise from the 2025 campaign? Brian, I'll start off with you on this one.
Biggest surprise, I am going to go with Grant Kipp. Grant Kipp was somebody who wasn't really on my radar much as a serious prospect at all. And then when he started the year, I mean, listeners that have been around the whole season will remember that we were just like nerding out big time about Grant Kipp in April. It was just like, oh my gosh, this guy, like this is different. And he had his struggles along the way. It was not a full successful season the whole year. But he did reach another level, and it was a level that I did not think he was going to be capable of reaching when I first saw him pitch back when he was originally signed. And I'm just really impressed by him. He's just a guy that I think lowered his release point slowly over time to sort of improve his metrics on his fastball, and has always had a really good idea to spin the baseball. And he's a legitimate prospect and a guy that if he takes one more leap forward is going to be right in the mix. And I love stories like that.
Z, what you got?
So I do want to say my biggest surprise, like if I just totally honest here, is Tyler Schleifer coming back and stuff just
Yeah.
skyrocketing. I just if you would have laid out a number of scenarios and kind of laid them all out for me and asked me to pick which one I would least anticipate actually happening. Again, this is no knock on Tyler, but just the nature of how much of a step up everything across the board looked. I just wouldn't have gone that route. That would have been the most surprising. But I do want to note a couple things, or at least give another shout out to somebody who's doing some really good work right now in the AFL, and that's Owen Ayers, who hit extremely well. He was certainly older for Myrtle, but it really raked. Is opening some eyes in the Arizona Fall League. I think that stuff matters. Like again, didn't really have that on my radar. He wasn't a top pick. Um, Cubs might have cleaned up pretty well in the catching in last year's draft between him and Arms.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to cheat a little bit with this one, and I'm going to give this the biggest surprise to the breakout for the Myrtle Beach Pelicans hitters in the second half of the season. And it's not necessarily a surprise from before the season to the end of the season. It's a surprise after what we saw from that first half of the year. And if you guys, I forget which one of you guys I was on with, but we detailed kind of this whole breakout for the Myrtle Beach with you, Zumach, with the Myrtle Beach kind of season recap. And so go back and listen to that episode because we detail it quite a bit. But like the fact that we saw just a night and day difference between the first half of the season and the second half for Angel Cepeda and Ty Southasine and Cole Mathis and not Cole Mathis, Matt Hallback, and who else was it? Leo Espinoza maybe, and a few other guys. Like it was a roster full of just crazy differences, and it ended up showing as far as their wins and losses go. Right, a team that was decently below 500 in the first half of the season and rattled off a Milwaukee Brewers-esque second half of the season to make it into the playoffs and just run away with the division. I forget what the exact numbers were, but like their run differential was like plus like 150 and the second best in the division was like plus 12. It was something absurd. And so that was to me the biggest surprise on how they turned it around this season. So a little bit cheating because I'm not giving it to one player, but hopefully that'll work just the same. All right, next up is the best MLB debut season, which I think for this year it can essentially be rookie of the year. I know in past seasons we've emphasized best MLB debut season because there's been guys that have been rookie eligible. I think it was a PCA problem, right, where he had debuted the previous season, and so it got a little wonky. He wasn't really a prospect all that much anymore, but this season, it doesn't really matter. Best MLB debut season for me, Cade Horton takes this prize. And
Who?
Matt Shaw, we gotta mention what Matt Shaw did. Matt Shaw was phenomenal second half of the year, and the way he turned it around was amazing. Super valuable player. Ended up being a Gold Glove finalist, which I posted on social media. Remember when I think it was me, all three of us here, and I think Brendan Miller came on the show. It was right around this time last year. And we spent like half an hour talking about Matt Shaw's defense. I'm pretty sure all of us were like, yeah, like not really a Gold Glove caliber player in the future. And then he turns around this season and is a Gold Glove player. So Matt Shaw deserves his roses here. But what Cade Horton did was downright insane this season, right? Like he became the ace of the team by year's end. We felt his absence in the playoffs this season. He was without getting swings and misses and strikeouts in the way that we expect him to in future years. I know Brian detailed that pretty well in a past episode. He was still outrageously good. So Cade Horton ran away with this award because he was so good. Brian, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. Cade was phenomenal. He was so composed. He was also, I mean, he was really just everything that we were sold on. Um, he was a dog, you know. I mean, just the days that he didn't have his best stuff would sort of just figure out a way to get by. A guy that you know we always said, and when he was in the minors, like stop throwing fastballs down the middle. And you know what, like he proved he can do that in the majors too, and he can still get by doing that. And so he's just a special player, and you kind of touched on it, but I would say like he did not have a very good season with his best pitch. His slider was not nearly as good in 2025 as it's been in the past, which gives me a ton of hope that the numbers he put up this year are sustainable moving forward because the strikeouts are going to catch up. And so if he had a little bit of good fortune and good luck there in his hot stretch in July and August, I think that's really just telling the story of the player he is when his stuff gets better.
Zumach, are you
Yeah,
making a
I
clean sweep?
mean, I joked, Cade Horton, Dr. Seuss pun in there too, but Cade was amazing. Cade, even coming back from an injury, which he was getting ready for the NLCS, gave everybody the belief that, I mean, think about where he was in like June, July. But if you told somebody in October that, hey, if the Cubs get through Game 5 of this NLDS, we've got Cade Horton, we've got a real chance to beat the Dodgers. Like the monumental leap that it took for him to be like an unquestioned frontline starting pitcher for a contending team down the stretch, and a no doubt Game 1 playoff starter is just unbelievable. I mean, the Cubs scouting deserves credit. The Cubs player development, Cade deserves credit. We had questions, or some legitimate questions from fans that were like, do you really want to debut him in Queens, in New York, like on the road, obviously, like, in his MLB debut? Is he going to get rattled? And he's like, he's not going to get rattled. If you've ever like somewhat interacted with Cade or seen his mannerisms, the dude was just an absolute bulldog. I want to give a shout out though to one person who hasn't got brought up, and that is Moises Ballesteros, who hit his
He
first
did?
Anthony Rizzo. I was gonna bring it up no matter what. Like, yes, Cade should get total props. I think what Matt Shaw showed down the stretch is amazing. I still want to give the shout out to the guy who I felt very comfortable hitting cleanup for this club if Kyle Tucker was not able to come back. I don't think I would have felt comfortable with anybody, but I think I would have felt pretty at ease that you were going to get a quality at bat and probably some pretty decent contact from him. I think what Moises did this year is awesome and potentially puts you into a conversation of, allowing him an opportunity to maybe force his way onto the roster next year and just kind of run with it.
What a super weird but awesome situation with Ballesteros, where like he was 22 when he was up at the end of the year, 22 years old. He was batting cleanup, and major league fans were kind of like, oh yeah, like he should be batting cleanup. Like this makes sense. And then he makes the playoff roster and he's not starting. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, like this kind of makes sense that he's not. Like it's the way he like weirdly fit in with this roster where like he was playing, but he's batting cleanup, but then there wasn't a spot for him. That's probably a precursor to like what we're talking about with Mo for the next few years or so. But like, yeah, just like the fact that most fans, I'd say 90% of fans were like, yeah, this makes sense. This 22-year-old is batting cleanup in a playoff race for the Chicago Cubs. Awesome. I love that. That's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean that there's really a story in that of the whole season, which was like this was an incredible year for the Cubs farm system getting love and ingratiated within the Cubs fan base. I mean, if you think about just the phenomenon that PCA was this year, the way that the Cade became like sort of the hope of the fan base, the way that the fans fell in love with Mo and Owen Casey there in the summer during a stretch where the Cubs weren't playing very well. I mean, really, and Daniel Palencia,
Yeah.
It really was a season. I remember Brendan Miller texting the three of us at one point, like, you guys must be having so much fun. Like, these are all your dudes that are leading this team to being so good. And it really, I mean, you could make the case that the story of the MLB season was like this perfect sort of mix of these veterans that did what you wanted them to do, and then these young players like being able to hang and thrive alongside them.
And I want to note that, and for very justifiable reasons, fans got riled up when Jed Hoyer in the offseason said, look, like what we're hoping for this year is that we've got some of these guys as our depth. And you hope that your depth can come up and contribute and get their feet wet. And, I'm obviously paraphrasing here, but effectively, like, no, we're not going to count on them. But if they come up, we hope that these are the caliber of players to contribute. And if you think across the landscape of who came up from the Cubs system, they all really contributed, which is a pretty high percentile outcome. But like, that's really incredible return.
Yeah, none of them I was like, oh, like they really flopped as soon as they debuted. Or Matt Shaw, but then he ended up turning it around, right? So that's super fun. All right, guys, the next four, we have four kind of wonky, our weird awards, and then we have superlatives at the end here that we'll kind of run through quicker. So let's start off with my personal favorite award. This goes back to the previous Growing Cubs show I did with Jimmy Nelligan. It is the Sean Barry Award for the most talked about player on the podcast. I guess I've got to give a little bit of background for new listeners. Sean Barry was a reliever for a relief prospect in the Cubs system back in 2019. I don't think he was in the organization. I think it was 2019, and he was playing in Eugene, and just dominated. Like he was like 24 years old, just dominated for that season in Eugene. And Jimmy and I came on the podcast, and we were talking about Sean Barry every single week because he was just so fun to watch. He was posting numbers, and then the COVID season hit. I think he ended up he retired or got released going into 2021, so he never saw the field again. And we kind of created this award because it could be for a guy who's Jackson Wiggins or Moises Ballesteros or a big name guy, but it's a guy that we just kept coming back to and talking about throughout the season. We couldn't avoid talking about him. He just always deserved some love, whether it was him performing on a week-to-week basis or we just like talking about the dude. And so I'll lead off the festivities for the Sean Barry Award. I've got to hand it to Riley Martin, right? Like if there's a guy that I've talked about the most on the podcast, I think us three as a whole, but like me especially, just Riley Martin over and over and over again. I think I mentioned him on almost every single episode, and he's been damn good. He's been awesome. And because he's a reliever like Sean Barry was, he's not a top 30 prospect in the Cubs organization because relievers just like ultimately don't bring that WAR value to a major league franchise and a major league team. But like, I think Riley Martin is terrific. I love talking about him. I won't ever stop. Shout out to Riley Martin for winning the Sean Barry Award here.
That goes to show the Cubs prospects that might be listening that if you want to one day win the Sean Barry Award for the most talked about player on the podcast, all you have to do is become a guest in the off season. That's exactly. The quickest route.
I was going to say Christian Franklin was leading the charge on this show for the first half of the season before he got traded. So yeah, that's exactly right.
We can be bribed.
Who you got for your pick?
I'm going to go with Luis Martinez Gomez because I'm going to wrangle last offseason. If listeners were around last offseason, I talked about one game that I watched LMG pitch in 2024 and just fell in love, put him in my top 25 prospect list. Talked about him. God, I feel like every episode I was on last offseason, I mentioned his name somehow. And then he had a really, really good season, and he was walking too many guys early on, but then really found his way, and then got mentioned in some Baseball America articles in the end of the year for how his stuff numbers are popping. And now he's in the Arizona Fall League, kind of doing the same thing. And just a guy that I always found my way to talk about.
Zumach, who we talk about a lot this year.
It is Riley for me. That's the guy that I've been. I mean, he's the guy that I had circled. We talked about him. I think every time I came on the podcast, there was even the draft one. If you look back, I'm pretty sure we brought up Riley Martin. It's just like, I mean, at some point, the dude. We're gonna. No offense to Sean Barry, but we may end up renaming the award in the future, the Riley Martin Award. And it's just, it's because of what he's done, right? And it's his rise from where he came from and his draft position and everything he did and everything it got to him here. And dude put up. I think he deserves the praise. He deserves the conversations.
A few honorable mentions for me. We talked a lot about Carter Trice this season. There was a lot of talk about his defense and flexibility and the power he's shown and stuff like that. We obviously talked a lot about Moises Ballesteros this season. I think Brian, you and I dedicated an entire episode to Moises Ballesteros, so that gets some extra love. And then the last guy, we talked a lot about Will Sanders this season, especially in the first half of the season. There was a lot of conversations about Will Sanders that we had and the way he kind of popped. And then kind of plateaued as the season wore on and stuff like that. But like Will Sanders was good. Spent the entire year, almost the entire year in AAA, which is all you could really ask for a guy drafted a couple of years ago. So
I
shout out to
also
Will.
had Owen Casey written down. Owen, we talked in June about how it felt like the fan base was like so sick of Owen
Yeah.
Casey, the prospect. And then he went on that insane hot streak, basically starting the next week. And
Yeah.
we talked a lot about, okay, how does this guy break into the majors? It's going to take an injury. And then the Tucker injury happens. And then all of a sudden you have crazy people saying, should the Cubs be playing Owen Casey ahead of Kyle Tucker? Is like the craziness that happened in 2 months. Like he really was a fixture in our conversations and really sort of weirdly in Cubs dialogue all year.
Yeah.
Well, and there was also immediately after that of you can't trade him, right? Like you can't
Right.
trade him, and
Yeah,
it really
they're at
was
the deadline. Yeah.
the whole season was basically like, where is Owen Casey and what is he doing?
As the guy who makes the thumbnails for the YouTube videos of the show, I had to find new pictures that Rich was posting of Owen Casey because I just kept using Owen Casey in every single thumbnail for the because that's what we kept talking about. So yeah, that's fair. The next award is kind of tricky. It is the Javier Assad Award that we handed out, I believe, for the first time last year. It is for a prospect that has never been ranked in the top 30. We can be kind of flexible on that, but could make an impact in Chicago one day. The reason why I think this is a little bit tricky is because the system looks a lot different than it did a couple of years ago when we started thinking about this and when we started thinking about Javier Assad, right? Like the depth is not there in the system like it once was a few years ago. And so Javier Assad was not cracking top 30 lists. Maybe if he was in the system now, he'd be in the back end of top 30s. Javier Assad really came out of nowhere, obviously. But I'm curious, Zumach, you want to start off with this one? Who's your Javier Assad award pick?
Yeah, I did want to go with another pitcher, and I think, in all fairness, like that's probably the easiest path to see a guy come from relatively, humble beginnings to actually making a major league contribution. I really wanted to go with Ethan Flanagan, who has been held back mostly due to injuries, some very legitimate injuries compiling, but stuff looks pretty good. He's getting good results. Lefties play. I mean, I think that, that's the kind of guy that all of a sudden just keeps moving up and up and up, and probably not going, what doesn't scream out like top 30 prospect to me still. And so just a guy that, maybe by the end he makes it if he kind of keeps going there. Not Rule 5 eligible until next season. So he's got a little bit of a runway to put himself up there. Lefties play, and just really wouldn't surprise me to see him in kind of a bulk role for this team.
Flanagan's a guy that's older than the average age at the level that he was playing at this year and will probably continue to be. So that's another reason why that might be a good pick. Brian, you sticking with the theme of pitchers here?
I'm not. Well, not really. A couple weeks ago when we prepped for this episode, I wrote down Owen Ayer's name, and he was a guy that popped for me watching on tape this year. A guy that like has some real physical gifts and also like I feel like has some potential to take a step forward. I am starting to wonder with how well he started the Arizona Fall League if it is possible that he will break into a top 30, even next season. I think you could probably make a case for him at number 30-ish right now. And so I'm wondering if that's no longer a valid choice, which is funny what 10 days in the AFL can do for somebody. And I do think pitchers are an easier have an easier path to get there. So I'm going to pick another AFL player that's probably not going to get talked about much because he's just in the shadow of others. Cohen Moreno is showing some pretty impressive numbers in Arizona, and he has always been a guy since he was drafted where it felt like there was going to be a time where he was just going to show up and be throwing 98 miles an hour. He just has an athleticism that most pitchers don't have. So I can see a world where Cohen all of a sudden is pitching at this high velocity, and he's showing like some really good changeups and has a decent slider. I could see a case where he just pops all of a sudden and it just happens maybe too quick to get to a top 30, but is like a sixth inning reliever.
Yeah, I like that. I'll stick with a pitcher here. My pick is not all that different than Zumach's here. I'm going to go with Evan Oschenbeck, who made it up to South Bend. There's various reasons why. I mean, like age compared to level, but also like the stuff is not elite. Like that, we're not going to see him crack top 30 lists or top 20 lists based on his stuff. And so he's just an outgetter and not cut from all that different of a cloth than Javier Assad was back in the day, right? Like Javier Assad was a guy that didn't have great stuff and honestly didn't even post good numbers like Evan Aschenbeck is. And all of a sudden Javier Assad saw all of his stuff tick up a little bit here and there and throw the kitchen sink at a batter and ended up taking off. And so Evan Aschenbeck is my pick, kind of from the same breath as Ethan Flanagan here. Any other honorable mentions from you guys before we move on? Okay. Let's go. The next award is the I-80 Road Warrior Award for the player who persevered while riding the shuttle between Iowa and Chicago. I feel like typically this goes to a reliever. I think that Ethan Roberts won this award a year ago. Bryan, who's your pick for the I-80 Road Warrior Award?
I'm going Ballesteros. You know, when he came up each time, it seemed to be under like emergency short notice situations, and he would just take a phenomenal at bat the next day. You know, he just the lack of I guess like the very first time he came up, there was a little bit of a learning curve, but you know, he was still putting the bat on the ball. And then every other time he came up, he just looked like he belonged, and so he's my pick.
Z?
Yeah, so I was actually going to go Ballesteros, and the memory that sticks out to me is he comes up, I think it's the second time they put him right in the lineup against the Brewers, and he hits that big double off of Freddie Peralta. I mean, he's hitting against a game one starter in the playoffs for the best team by record in Major League Baseball this year, and like doesn't surprise anybody, right? So there's an adage in scouting that's just like hitters hit. You know, it's cold that day, hitters hit. You know, like you're tired, hitters hit. Moises Ballesteros, dude, hitters hit. He just hits. It doesn't matter what the scenario is. You know, it just was impressive. Ryden came back up, hit, no shock.
I'll go with a pitcher here, and it's kind of a wonky pick because it's not like he had. I mean, Ballesteros obviously came up at the end of the year and persevered in a way like he was super successful in Chicago. I want to pick Jordan Wicks here, and like the reason why I'm going with Jordan Wicks is because he just had the wonkiest season of all time. Like
jerked around,
yeah, right. Like him bouncing from the starting rotation in Iowa to the starting rotation in Chicago to the bullpen in Chicago to the bullpen in Iowa to having like 2.5 weeks off because he's on a taxi squad bouncing back and forth, very clearly not in the extended trust tree of Craig Counsell this season or last season. Like that, he's not part of that. But I think that like during his time in AAA, Jordan Wicks was very good when he went out there and was able to throw. Despite the weird, like he's throwing 45 pitches. Like, what is that? Like, what is him? Is that a reliever or a starter? I'm not sure because I don't think that he knew as the season wore on. So I'm really interested to see what Jordan Wicks, like what happens with Jordan Wicks this offseason. Like we are all big Jordan Wicks fans here. Former first round pick, not really given an extended look or an extended shot in Chicago due to injuries and some less than stellar stats that he's put up there. But like, if this is a guy that the Cubs ultimately end up trading, like, what is his trade value? Like, where does he fall? I don't know where he falls in the Cubs or for another team. But if I'm another team, I would absolutely give Jordan Wicks a shot at a rotation, especially if I'm a team below talent wise than what the Chicago Cubs are. So
I had him written down too, and I'll note that his last 11 games across both AAA and the majors, 28 2/3 innings, only 20 hits, 2.20 ERA. 32 strikeouts, 6 walks. And so that's a guy that like amidst so much changing all the time underneath his feet actually like was pitching really well at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's a good call. I appreciate you having the numbers that I don't have pulled up. So next award is the last one before the superlatives. It is the Hey, Did You Lose My Number award for the player most deserving of a promotion that never got it. Greg Zumach.
This is a sweep? Is this a sweep?
Yeah.
Riley Martin? Is it Riley Martin?
Oh, I actually don't have Riley Martin here.
Oh, no.
I was just going on and on about Riley. I don't have him. Zumach, I'll let you talk about him first. I mean,
it's Riley. So before they signed Tom Cosgrove, I thought, or traded for him from the Padres, I thought, I think Riley's going to get a call here. Messaging with some folks in the org, and they thought, like, oh, yeah, like Riley's definitely, a very possible candidate. And then same thing with Genesis Cabrera. which, that one honestly probably should have gone to Riley. Like
Yeah.
if we're looking back on it. So I just thought that there were some missed opportunities. I'm hoping he's a no doubt Rule 5 ad this winter, because I think he's a very, very easy selection in the Rule 5 for a team. Like if you are the White Sox or whatever, picking at the top, like just plug him into the bullpen and see what you got there. So I'm very much hoping he is a 40-man selection here in December.
Brian, you got Riley too?
Yeah, when Riley just absolutely shoved in May and June, and like Greg mentioned, there really did seem like there was a 2-week stretch there where if just one player got injured, there was no doubt who was getting called up. And it's amazing how often it comes down to certain days and just the timing of things, and it just didn't come together for Riley this year. But yeah, I think his stuff plus numbers are gonna really pop for teams this offseason in a way that frankly like they shouldn't have a year ago. His stuff is definitively better now than it was a year ago. He achieved that and deserves credit for that, and he deserves a major league opportunity sooner rather than later on the back of that.
So the reason why I did not choose Riley Martin here is because I haven't given any awards out to Johnny Long yet. I know we talked, like you guys talked about him a little bit. You guys gave him the Hitter of the Year award. I did not. I gave it to Owen. And so I'm going Johnny Long here. He just dominated the entire season long in Iowa. Like while Owen Casey and Moises Ballesteros and other guys and Kevin Alcantara got the call up to Chicago, Johnny Long did not get that. And I know it was kind of a weird thing where like, where does he fit on the roster? I don't disagree with that, but like, you just look at what he did the entire season. You talk about guys riding hot streaks and how that kind of leads into a promotion. Well, he rode a hot streak the entire season long. There was never really an extended stretch where he was cooled off. And so Johnny Long is my pick here for the Hey, Did You Lose My Number award. I want to give one like weird shout out to Christian Hernandez, who deserved a promotion up to Double-A Tennessee. Probably both statistically, but also just like he needed to be up there. Like the three of us talked about it quite a bit, where it's like, yeah, he just needs to be up in Double-A. And so I want to give it a shout out to him, where like he deserved that probably halfway through the year, where we need to see what he was about in Double-A. Different than these two other guys for sure, but I wanted to shout him out.
I would shout out Keegan Thompson, who, if we had heard at any point that Keegan was getting called up, every Cub fan we know would have been like, awesome, love that dude. And had a pretty good season. He's going to be off to another organization this offseason, and he'll get another opportunity. I'm very sure of it.
All right, boys, you ready for some superlatives?
Yeah.
So most of these guys, for the most part, we've already talked about a decent amount, so we can churn through these fairly fast. We'll start off with best fastball, who I have as Jackson Wiggins. Brian, Zumach, you guys are the same way?
Yeah, I think so. And it's not only the best fastball, it's one of the most unusual fastballs.
Yeah.
Metric wise.
Yeah, it's not often that 100-mile-per-hour fastballs play up with their underlying metrics, but his does. It's better than 100 sounds.
Yeah, he's going to be fun to watch. Best breaking ball, so curveball, slider. I'm going to go again with Riley Martin on this one. Riley Martin's curveball, I think, is the best breaking ball in the Cubs farm system, and I think that especially in an era where sliders are more popular to be used as your go-to breaking ball pitch, we saw Riley Martin experiment going with the slider a little bit more than the curveball. I guess this was a couple years back, and then he was like, you know what, like the curveball is really freaking good. Let's just keep using the curveball. And so that's my pick for best breaking ball. Brian?
I got two here. I got Jocelyn Florentino's slow sweeper. He throws this 74 to 77 mile per hour sweeper that I don't know is a major league pitch, but it's certainly a pitch that gets low A hitters out. It was really fun to watch. And then Arian Rodriguez's slider I also want to mention, because Arian stepped forward this year a little bit in terms of pitchability by just pitching off his slider. I would bet that he led the system in breaking ball usage. He throws his slider more than his fastball. Against righties, it feels like he throws his slider pretty much every pitch, and he gets hitters out a lot. It doesn't have the sharpness of bite of other breakers, but it's just a pitch that gets thrown a ton and works.
Yep, I'm going to toss out actually Wiggins again just for the slider. But what I want to note about the slider is that the shape kind of morphed and changed throughout the season, to the point that we had real questions about whether there were two pitches going on there. I checked back in with some Cubs folks who were like, nah, he's kind of searching for it. So there was inconsistent times throughout the season. It was a very inconsistent pitch. I would say at its peak, there were some absolutely excellent sliders.
I will throw an honorable mention to Grant Kipp's slider that I really liked this season quite a bit. I've got best off speed here, change up, splitter, that type of pitch. I texted you guys before we came on. I'm only going to throw out honorable mentions for this. I don't feel super passionately about a changeup or a splitter in this organization, and so I think Bryan, if you want to, do you want to hand out an award for this pitch?
Yeah, it's a close battle. There's two guys that I think are really close. Nick Dean has a phenomenal changeup. I had my notes from watching him the first time this year. I was like, oh my god, like I know this is a good pitch, and it's like still like when you have an off season off from watching it and you watch it the first time, you're like, wow, that's phenomenal. But Ethan Flanagan's changeup this year, I mean, wasn't on my radar as a pitch to watch in the system, and it was awesome. I mean, he really, really does pronate phenomenally well on that pitch and used it a ton to get strikeouts in low A. It's my favorite changeup to watch in the system, so Ethan Flanagan would get this award for me.
Zumach, you got honorable mentions or any picks to throw out there?
No, I mean, I just want to note that he's not in the system. Ryan Gallagher's changeup is fantastic. Ryan Gallagher's changeup is the reason that the Cubs were able to even really make a deal that included him for a major league player. So, yep.
Yeah, what I had on my honorable mentions list, I had Nick Dean's changeup as well. I had Luis Martinez Gomez's splitter that I think got some love at Baseball America in a few weeks ago, and then I've been saying it. Jackson Wiggins' changeup, it's not consistent. It flashes good, man. Like I was impressed with it a year ago. I'm still impressed with it this year. He still needs to figure it out a little bit more, but like I like the pitch quite a bit. So maybe it's a Cade Horton situation where it starts to flash a little bit better once he makes his major league debut than it did in the minors. But
two more just like guys we have not mentioned yet that I think show well in this category. Kevin Camacho in Myrtle Beach this year. I think that's his best pitch. And Connor Schultz really was kind of coming on at the end of the year as a guy that was sort of off the radar, but sort of quietly breaking out in August and September. I think that's also Connor's best pitch. And that's a guy that he's going to be in a double-A rotation next year. And, I keep saying it, but like another guy that if he just takes a little step forward, like he's not that far off. I was impressed by him. He's one that we don't talk or think about very much, but a pretty decent player.
All right, guys, 4 more awards to hand out, and they're all position players. The first one is most power in the organization. Bryan, you lead off with this one.
It's Owen Casey. I mean, I don't even know what else to say. He took a step forward with using it in games this year, which was really important. And I mean, dude can hit a baseball hard.
Z?
I was muted, but yeah, it's Casey. I really no question there. What he showed is, I mean, it's Titanic raw power. Just unbelievably impressive, and it's very important in Wrigley Field. It's all Fields power.
Yeah. Owen Casey's my pick for most power as well. It's different this year, though, right? I think he probably won the award last year as well for us. But last year, I think when we were saying that Owen Casey had the most power, it was like, oh no, like I promise he does. Like I promise he has the most power. It's the exit velos, but like he also can hit tanks. And this year's like, of course, it's Owen Casey. Like it's easy. So yeah, that's different than last year, but definitely most power for Owen Casey. Best field.
I sure hope Ethan Conrad wins most power next year. That would be a really good thing for the Cubs farm system.
That'd be fun. Zumach, best field to hit among Cubs prospects this year.
Well, I really want to note that the most fun outcome would be Kane Kepley winning for most power, or a truly disastrous situation. I don't know. Best field to hit is Moises. Like, just it's unbelievable feel. It's just incredible feel for hit.
Yeah, Bryan, same.
Yeah, it would be Ballesteros. I would have to give a shout out to Kane Kepley because Kane's a fun one. He's going to win probably next year when Ballesteros falls off the list. But Moises is one of the best in the world.
Yeah, and feel to hit is like important here, an important description here, where it's like not like who makes the most contact. It's like best feel to hit. He finds barrels better than anybody else in the organization at ease, versus a guy that's just slapping at the ball. And so it's Moises Ballesteros here. I have this next one listed as fastest runner. If you guys want to interpret this as best base runner or best use of speed or however you want to describe this one, I will lead off with Christian Hernandez as being my pick. He was. It's funny because last year I think James Triantos was my pick last year, and it was kind of like, oh, he burst onto the onto the scene with speed last year, where we didn't really think of Triantos in that way in 2024 going into the season, and he ended up stealing all these bases. Christian Hernandez kind of the same way. Where like we knew he had some speed, but he ended up setting records in South Bend for the number of stolen bases that he had. He was rivaling John Andrioli and Tony Campana in terms of stolen bases in the Cubs organization. So shout out to Christian Hernandez, fastest runner, best base runner, whatever you want to describe here. Bryan, your turn.
I don't feel phenomenally about an answer here. I mean, I think Hernandez is probably the right answer, but yeah, it really felt more instinctual than fast to me this year. I'm gonna go Alexi Lampoy because he's the one that I enjoy watching run after balls in the gap, I think, the most.
I'm actually going to give a shout out to Kane Kepley here because while you can't totally take what happened in college and just approximate it, he had a total of 45 steals in 61 games. You add another 16 stolen bases in pro ball in 28 games. That is 61 stolen bases in 89 games last season, which is a 111 steal pace over 162. Of course, not like that isn't going to happen with pro level catching as he moves up. Point is that I think he just really was an adept base runner, was very smart about it. Yes, he's got some speed, but also just how he used it was very successful. And for that profile to continue, he'd really benefit if he can continue to really rack up steals at a good clip, 30, 40 a year.
I just realized we could say Billy Hamilton. I switched my answer
yeah,
to
that's
him.
True. Good point.
How weird that Billy Hamilton was in the organization but wasn't used in the playoffs. Strange. Yeah. But all right, our final award to hand out is the award for best defense. And Bryan, I'm going to let you lead off with your pick for the best defender in the organization.
I wonder if you guys will be surprised by my answer or not, but I am going to go with Ty Southasine. I think that when there were people when I was growing up that said that Derek Jeter was a good defender, the thing that they were cluing on was that Derek's instincts were really good. He had a lot of faults as a defender, but he just had a knack for making phenomenal plays by having some pretty good instincts, and Ty's got a little bit of that. He had some really highlight reel plays, and I don't know, it just seems like he's on the move before the camera gets to him in a way that I don't see otherwise. I was really impressed with him, and not really a prospect that I was vibing with before the season. Didn't really understand or see the profile, and a guy that I could see being a plus defender someday. So it makes a little more sense to me now.
If you're a minor league player, you should talk to the production staff at these affiliates and say, hey, switch over to the field cam a little bit late so it looks like I'm already on the move earlier than what I really am.
Right.
Zumach, what you got for defender of the year, best defense?
I went kind of back and forth on a couple things here. I really want to note, Christian Hernandez has done a lot defensively for me. I still think that maybe we sleep on him a little bit at the shortstop level and what that impact is. Probably not us, but I just mean externally. Mm-hmm. And I came away awfully impressed there. I think another guy I want to give at least a shout out to is Ariel Armas from the catching side. I think that he's going to need to be a very good defensive catcher. And he racked up a couple errors here or there, but I think watching him and how he guided that pitching staff goes into defense for me, and just how he's able to kind of incorporate all of that. So I just kind of wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to him.
Yeah, I'll give
throws are so accurate.
Yeah, I'll give a bigger shout out. Ariel Armas is my pick for best defense in the organization. He's who I've got down here. I think that you're right. How he manages the pitching staff is fairly apparent as it can be while watching on MILB TV, which is something, right? Like it's not you don't get that from every catcher, but like you can kind of see that through the screen. I'd love to get some more information on that, but it's the arm though, both the arm strength, but the accuracy is pretty insane. He threw out 60 base runners this season. He had 60 caught stealings this season,
Wild.
which set a South Bend Cubs record. He was tremendous at throwing out runners. Really impressed me this season. And if that bat can be better than what we expected it to be, I think the defense is really damn good. And that's what he was known for when he was drafted. And it's kind of played well. And the Cubs love drafting guys that that manage a pitching staff well. It's the Casey Opitzes of the world, right? And if Ariel Armis can be a slightly below average offensive player as he climbs up to the farm system, the glove is clearly good enough because and more specifically the arm is clearly good enough. So yeah, shout out to Ariel Armis, my best defense in the Cubs farm system.
Yep. In an extreme example, I mean, we've seen how long of a career Austin Hedges can have, and he is a horrendous hitter, but he is a phenomenal defender and an excellent guide of a pitching staff. And like many organizations still put some value on all of those intrinsic nature. So
Hedges just signed another $4 million extension to stay in Cleveland.
God bless. That is fantastic.
It's Jeff Mathis, the Jeff Mathis effect, but like on steroids, kind of like it's crazy. So, all right, guys, that's what we got. Extra long show, extra long award show. This is my single favorite episode every year because we get to kind of recap the system as a whole. I will kick it. I guess a little bit of background on the show for the remainder of the offseason. I'm not sure what the schedule looks like. If I'm being completely honest with you guys, both you guys as Bryan and Zumach, and then you guys as listeners, typically what we do in the off seasons, we do every other week episodes, and we do several player interviews throughout the offseason. I'm still intending on doing some interviews throughout the offseason. That's still what I want to do. As far as a schedule, it may be a little bit more hit or miss this offseason. It may not be a regularly scheduled every other Tuesday morning, but we will be bringing episodes throughout the offseason, all three of us together, and then with some players on and some other fun guests on the show. I'm sure we'll get Brendan Miller on the show at some point this offseason. So that's what we have as far as expectations for the rest of the offseason. But like I'll end this by saying that like I can't thank you guys enough for listening throughout the season. Like this is while we kind of recapped some of the season in our last episode about a month ago, like this is truly like the end of the season episode. And like the listeners out there were tremendous. They're great every single year, but like this year was outrageous. Like the amount of love that was shown to all three of us throughout the offseason or throughout the season, jumping in the comments on YouTube, sending us shout outs on social media, like cannot thank you guys enough for tuning in each week throughout the season. So I will kick it to Bryan for some parting thoughts if you have any.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the Cubs win a series and play baseball at Wrigley Field this year, and it was a really special season and a season like we talked about that the farm system really contributed to success, and just about as much fun as I've had in a decade watching Cubs baseball. And just grateful to do it. Don't as well as Huss. I don't really know what this offseason will look like for me in contributions, but I hope to talk Cubs baseball with you all, be it on Twitter, on our 1060 West Discord. We won't be far away, that's for sure.
Zumach, what you got over there to wrap up the season?
I mean, not a huge surprise. Bryan kind of echoed some of the things that I'd say, tossed it out ahead of time. We saw the Cubs prospects that we've been following since even before the draft come up and contribute to playoff wins and have the crowd of Wrigley shaking with how intense that was, to the point that like external media were talking about how intense Wrigley is. Actually, Pat Murphy has still not stopped talking about how intense Wrigley was, and the impact of those young players is going to be, apparent going forward. The exciting and hard part about all this is that the Cubs are clearly in win now mode.
Yeah.
And some of these guys that we talked about today may not even be in the organization come March or April. but that's where you want to be as an organization. You want to be the team that's continuing to find guys, draft them, develop them, and then get major league production out of them in many different ways. And sometimes that means giving those players an opportunity to have their career blossom in other places. Cubs are the recipient of that with Michael Busch. So it's an exciting time. It'll be an interesting time at the baseball winter meetings and this offseason. But at the end of the day, I was really impressed with what happened this season, and here's to many more exciting memories in the future.
Yeah, this actually is the last comment I'll make. Is that this season felt to a certain degree like a culmination of a lot that we've been doing as far as the podcast goes over the past several years, right? We've been going through some hard times at the major league level with the Cubs and some rebuilding that wasn't actually rebuilding, and following prospects and people tuning into the show and people tuning into our Twitter accounts and stuff like that, because the hope was in the minor leagues. The hope was with these prospects. And so to see a lot of those homegrown players, which I talked about a lot, impacting the Chicago Cubs this season and in the playoffs, was like the coolest thing. It was the coolest thing, because I mentioned I started recording podcasts about Cubs prospects back in 2019, and we haven't really seen this happen in that window of time where we're watching the farm, we're watching the homegrown guys make the Chicago Cubs a playoff team. And so that's been really fun. It felt like a culmination of all that fun and hard work on our end this one season, which for guys that are Chicago Cubs fans first and foremost over prospect guys, like that's amazing, So I'll leave it with that. Again, Bryan, thank you. Bryan and Zumach, both thank you guys so much for coming on throughout this season. Thank you guys to the listeners. You can subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff. Find us on social media. Check us out on the 1060 West Discord channel. But with that, we'll talk to you guys very soon. Take care, guys.